Hello, my name is Chaz Hampton, and today I will be giving you the presentation on the dynamic UI/UX that I've worked on. This is a cloud server and native mobile application integration that I've done under an independent study. So in an overview, I've been tasked with the implementation of a dual functionality in the existing Bubblin mobile application for text question displays and non-text question displays, also known as bubble-only questions, which are similar to Scantron type questions where it's only multiple choice, whereas before we only had full text-based questions on the mobile application displayed, and this needs to be updated in the web server and also the server side. So in order to implement the new dynamically loaded user interface and user experience, we used native code in Android and iOS. And we also, for the server-side code, we mostly coded that with PHP, HTML, a little bit of JavaScript, just to kind of get it all going. So on the server side, for the front end, this is what you would use to create a test. So this is what it looks like. Here on the left, this is where we have the text-based view. So we have each question is required to have its corresponding text along with the answer. And however, we also needed the functionality to only have the actual questions as part of the answer sheet. So the task was to kind of get it working where either one of these could be selected by the teacher, and then using the same mobile application without changing the entire workings of it, we needed to be able to show either this type of screen or this type of screen. And we had that same kind of challenge on the server side, where to the user it needs to appear simple, just to kind of flip back and forth between these two views. So from here, I'd like to show the back-end website user interface, user experience layout. So when I'm working on the server, I'm working in Visual Studio Code. I like it a lot just because it has some nice text highlighting. It has really nice search features. It keeps everything nice and organized for me over here on the left tab, little browser. So I do like it. I also like the scroll functionality that they've implemented. Makes it really nice for debugging or implementing new features, and really just starting projects from scratch, just because of how they keep everything nice and organized for you with very little effort. So for me, when I went to go implement the new functionality onto the web server, this is where it starts. This is the code that's maintained. This is our code base for the website that we were trying to update the code for. So my first task was to get familiar with the code, see what's going on, what's kind of the basic workings of this, and then I can go in and say, okay, I know how it's working. I need to figure out how I can actually add some new functionality to this thing and kind of change it up. So basically what I did was I used a database variable to kind of help coordinate amongst many views and many different files to kind of understand that whether we're looking at a simple or a non-simple interface between the website and also the applications themselves. So this is where all of my code is at. So you can see there's many files. This is a Laravel project. So it's actually nice to have these files. It's nice to have it kind of broken apart, and kind of put in their respective folders and stuff like this. So this is actually one of the huge advantages of using Laravel. So my first feature was to go through, see how everything was kind of working. And the best part of this is I can search all of these pretty much instantly with their search feature. So what I did was I added a database variable called SimpleT. So here, this is where we're defining our, for instance, we're having tests in this application, so we have a class called tests, extended from model, and these are our variables. So this was pretty much the best place for adding the variable. I just called it SimpleT, standing for simple test. It's going to be a Boolean value, something that we could very simply test and see, what's the user trying to get slash the teacher trying to create from this. So this is where it started. So you simply add that here, and then we can come down here. The blade files in Laravel. Blade files are what's the interface files for the server. So this is how you can actually see what's going on with the front end. So this is everything front end. This is most of the visual stuff, which is all extended from layout.app. So in layouts.app, that's where, and also at section in layouts.app, this is where we're defining most of our basic HTML, like JavaScript type design. And that just allows us for the reusability of only needing two lines of code to include all of that, kind of repetitive code that you need when you're designing a web page. So just kind of take that for what it is, and then here, this is where we're designing the create test blade.php. So this is where we're actually presenting to the user, what we'd like them to see. So through here, we came down and we actually added the simple T, bubble layout only, select what you want. So here we're basically showing the user, giving them a form type, variable type checkbox. So this is allowing us to get these variables into the database, into the other files associated with our Laravel project, and also display it to the user. So if we go over to our website, we can see, if we go to our math course, create a new test, we're presented with this, which is going to show us, that will show the user whether they would like this sort of exam or this sort of exam. So that's created right here, and so that's how they're able to just kind of check back and forth, which was created before that in the database. So then edit test, this is where a teacher can pretty much come in here, change up their answers if they like, change the times, change anything to do with their test. So it's just kind of following through, and that's what the search feature is nice for, is it gives me a way to track where this variable is being used at through the entire project. So I'll come up to the submission controller. Here we're just detecting some simple logic. If it's a simple test, if simple test is equal to no in the database for this specific test, we're going to print that out to the log. We're going to scramble the test. In this instance, because it's not a simple test, so we would like to automatically scramble the ordering, and then we'll save that new scrambled string as the answer key back into the database. For the response.json, this is how it's working for the phones. So this is all working with a RESTful API. So when the phone is making a request to the web server, and it's going to get that response, for the response, we're sending to that, along with all of the other test information, the fact whether we're having a simple test or not, which is stored as a Boolean value in our database and also the web server. So if we go over to let's say our Swift, so we have, this is on iOS and also Java. So we can show iOS first. We'll search. Okay, and now here we can see kind of how we're working with this. So we grab it from the database, from the response that we're getting, and we already know what it's called. So we're going to take that string value, and I believe we do nothing until we pass it to the next view controller, which is where we'll actually start using it. And then from here, depending on what that value is, depends on which layout that we're actually going to show the user. So we have the same segue going to two separate interfaces depending on that variable. So that's how it's sort of dynamic, is because it's only one segue, but it's being changed off of that specific situation. So up here at the top, we have the simple layout, which was needed to be designed from scratch. So we basically designed these two so that the user can see basically their text. They're built to be similar but not identical, just because they have kind of different niches in their classes. So here we made the bubbles a bit smaller just to kind of accommodate for that large text area. And then here, when we built it up, we just left the simple bubbles. We were able to make them a little bit bigger and easier to see, easier to press, stuff like that. And these are all built with the, hold on, let me pull it up for you. These are built in table views with custom UI sails, and then the buttons are actually radio buttons. And what I just said is the same for iOS as well as Android. They're with the UI objects are very similar. They're not identical because we're going from Swift to Java and such, but it is very similar, and they have pretty much the same names. So it is nice for that fact that kind of just the portability of this feature to both of them isn't like incredibly hard. So, and then the same thing. So as I searched here, as I usually do, this is how I can work on adding new things, seeing where things are going, and as soon as the project, as soon as you add enough features, it starts to kind of balloon on you. So the search feature is really quite useful. So that's usually what I'm doing to find out where I'm going. And then so let's say I was to swap over here onto my Android, I need to add a quick feature, then I'm just going to use the find in path feature, which is going to search all the files. And I can quickly just go through and get a nice peek of what my code in that file associated with what I've searched for is doing. So here you can see I've made a few separate classes for the new activity views / controller views that we're adding, which is the front end user interface, user experience that we're presenting to the user. And these classes are the ones, whether it's the simple or non-simple test, these are the ones that are presented to the user when they're actually using the app. So that's sort of the workflow of how I was able to do this. When you go, so I did show the native code here. When going from this native code to the web server, I'm actually doing that through terminal. I understand this has a built-in terminal. I like this. So the way this happens is I just SSH into my server, and then I can get into my regular folder, and here is where I can actually do my git / pull, get all these kind of things. So this is where I'm pulling from my GitHub repository, and I'm actually pushing from my local machine, where I just simply cd into the folder containing this project, push it out, and then pull it down onto the server. That's how I get it out into the web so that it's out here for the public to see. So again, pretty much the layout that we went over for the front end, the user interface / user experience is shown here. We have a conceptualized simple version and a conceptualized non-simple version. As you can see, funny enough, the work for doing front end ends up being mostly back end, where you're just staring at a bunch of code and Swift / Java files. But ultimately, with the goal just to change a simple fact of what the user is seeing. So we got this to work with the web server through RESTful API with our database to show when it's changing, and that's how we're presenting the different views for the iOS and the Android phones. I've already kind of went over the back end for the iOS user interface and user experience. So in conclusion, these are my references. So if you're curious about any of the things that I've talked about, they all have really good documentation. Laravel has great documentation. Obviously, Apple and Android are very supportive. And the web server that we're using, which I hadn't mentioned yet, is a DigitalOcean droplet. So DigitalOcean is our cloud platform. This web server that I built is on the cloud. So if you're interested in that, they're very reasonably priced and pretty competitive VPS web hosting server. So again, thank you for listening to my presentation. If you have any questions, please send me an email at chazriver@gmail.com. Thank you.